Hey everybody, Jeremy Linen, founder and creator of BreadIQ, and just want to let you guys know there was a big update to BreadIQ just released on the App Store earlier today. So we are now live with version 1.3, and I didn't talk about version 1.2 yet because I was waiting on this because they came in kind of right on top of each other, just with how Apple kind of got backed up on their approval process with some things. 1.2 took a minute, version 1.3 took a matter of a few hours. So we're going to talk about them together. So really, a lot happening here. Probably the biggest thing that I can talk about is a total system architecture change for the app. Previously, the release version of the app basically required an internet connection to do anything. That was the first thing that I changed with post launch updates is moving this to being a completely on device experience so that you're not required to have an internet connection to do everything in the app. It works offline. So that's a really big deal. That was a lot of work. It was tens of hours of programming that went into being able to make that possible. But it makes everything in the app better, simply not being constrained by the quality of your internet connection. So that's a big deal. Then beyond that, version 1.3, a lot of new features. Honestly, I could call this version 2 just with how much new stuff that we have going on. So I'm going to list off some of the new things that we have. So there's a Safari share extension, which helps make the recipe import function better. So if you're browsing Safari and you see a recipe that you come across, if you have the extension installed in Safari, you can just send that recipe directly to the app from Safari without you having to go back and forth and make all that work. Another really big deal is nutritional analysis. So was able to wrap in USDA database information for all the ingredients that BreadIQ is programmed for, and we're able to make reasonably accurate estimations for any user created bread recipe that you come up with in the app. Now, quick note: these are not lab verified, so they are for informational purposes, but they are reasonably accurate, just based on like I said, USDA database, and then we do account for anticipated moisture loss during baking. So if you want to have calories and fat, we did stick to macronutrient stuff. But if you want to have some awareness of what's going on nutritionally with your bread, BreadIQ now makes that possible. And then next up, we have Autolyse support for wheat and rye. So if you're doing a high percentage wheat and rye flours in your doughs, one thing that you may or may not be aware of is how tricky that can be with how these doughs need to be handled at that point. The hydration changes, the fermentation timeline changes. BreadIQ can account for that from day one. What it wasn't engineered to be able to do at launch that we quickly fixed here is adding support for Autolyse, which there will be a Substack article talking about that. But changes basically the handling of how these doughs get made. They don't get kneaded as much. The flour gets rested with the water to be able to allow for that enzymatic activity to break down the bran. And just it's a different way of developing gluten in doughs when you get into these high percentage whole grain flours. BreadIQ now supports this very scientifically. Next up, just some really nice user interface fixes. There's now a Celsius and Fahrenheit toggle switch in user settings. So I have made this app available really all over the world. And then, obviously here in America, we do Fahrenheit. The rest of the world doesn't. But depending on whichever temperature scale you're more comfortable with, you now have that choice to be able to work however you want to. I did take into effect that yeast and hydration percentages. If you're not a bread guru, seeing these numbers presented in your face when you're going to calculate a formula, that might be a little confusing. So just kind of following some design leads from companies like Canon, where you can still customize this stuff. It's just one menu layer down to be able to do that. So there's an advanced setting tab that comes up that if you want to get in there and play around with that, you can. But if you just want to make bread, this makes this a little bit faster, a little bit more seamless, so you don't have to really sweat some of the numbers so much in the formulas. And then lastly, a total math engine overhaul went into version 1.3. There will be a Substack article about this as well, but we started off with a pretty simple algebraic equation to calculate yeast activity, which it worked, but it doesn't support the future the way that I want it to. So there is a upcoming feature with BreadIQ that will make BreadIQ unquestionably peerless in a class of its own. And in order to make that possible, the entire math engine had to be redone, and we're now operating on differential calculus instead of algebra, which took a lot for me to get my head around. But that's going to be a very big deal when I'm ready to talk about it a little bit more. Trust me, it's going to be really cool. But lastly, the thing that I'll say, but besides that feature, before that happens, Android support is coming soon. So, I know people personally that are not iPhone users. So if you're an Android user, stay tuned. I did just sign up for a Google developer account over the weekend to be able to get this onto the Google Play Store. So if you're an Android user, I got you. Stay tuned. Thanks a lot.